I was always a very lucky person. I was born into a very rich family, and I had everything I could ever want. I had a big house with a big yard and a swimming pool. I had lots of toys and clothes, and I went to the best schools. I had many friends, and I was always invited to all the best parties. But there was one thing I didn't have: happiness. No matter how much I had, I always felt empty inside. I always felt like there was something missing. One day, when I was about 10 years old, my parents decided to move us to a new house. It was a big old house on a hill, and it was surrounded by a dark forest. I didn't like the house at first. It was old and dusty, and it felt cold and creepy. But I soon started to make friends with the house. I would spend hours exploring the rooms and hallways, and I would often find myself talking to the house. I would tell it my secrets, and it would listen without judgment. One night, I woke up to a strange sound. It was a soft, whispering sound, and it seemed to be coming from the attic. I was scared, but I couldn't help but be curious. I got out of bed and crept up the stairs to the attic. The attic was dark and dusty, and it was filled with old furniture and boxes. I could hear the whispering sound coming from behind a large antique wardrobe. I slowly walked over to the wardrobe and opened the door. Behind the door was a small room, and in the middle of the room was a rocking chair. In the chair was an old woman, and she was rocking back and forth. She was very thin and pale, and she had long white hair that hung down to her waist. The old woman looked at me with her big black eyes, and she smiled a wicked smile. She said, "Hello, child. I have been waiting for you." I was terrified, and I turned to run away. But the old woman grabbed my arm and held me tight. She said, "You can't leave me, child. You belong to me now." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The old woman laughed and she said, "You will never escape me, child. I will haunt you forever." The old woman started to rock back and forth in her chair, and I started to feel dizzy. I felt like I was being pulled into a dark vortex. I woke up with a start, and I was covered in sweat. I was shaking all over, and I was terrified. I knew that what I had seen was real. The old woman was real, and she was coming for me. I tried to tell my parents about the old woman, but they didn't believe me. They thought I was just making it up. I knew that I wasn't making it up, though. The old woman was real, and she was going to get me. I started to see the old woman everywhere I went. I would see her in the shadows, and I would hear her whispering in my ear. I was always scared, and I never felt safe. I tried to ignore the old woman, but she wouldn't leave me alone. She was always there, watching me, waiting for me. One night, I woke up to a cold, clammy hand on my face. I opened my eyes and I saw the old woman standing over me. She was smiling, and her eyes were glowing red. The old woman said, "It's time, child." I was terrified, but I knew that I couldn't escape her. I closed my eyes and waited for the end. I felt the old woman's cold hand on my cheek, and then everything went black. I woke up in a dark room. I was cold and scared, and I didn't know where I was. I tried to stand up, but I couldn't. I was tied to a chair, and my hands were bound behind my back. The old woman walked into the room, and she was carrying a knife. She smiled at me, and she said, "Now, child, we can play our game." The old woman started to torture me. She cut me with her knife, and she burned me with fire. I screamed and cried, but she didn't stop. I thought I would never escape her, but then I saw something that gave me hope. In the corner of the room, I saw a small glowing light. I reached out my hand towards the light, and it pulled me towards it. The light got brighter and brighter, and then I was free. I was standing in a field of flowers, and the sun was shining.